All right, let's jump right into this explainer on the incredible neuroscience of becoming conscious while you're fast asleep. Have you ever wondered what actually happens in the brain when the boundary between waking reality and the dream world just suddenly collapses? Today, we're going to explore this wild hybrid state of consciousness we call lucid dreaming. We'll be unpacking the science, the actual mechanics, and some truly mind-bending experiments that prove our minds are way more complex than we ever gave them credit for. So picture this. You're standing in your kitchen. Maybe the clock changes every single time you glance at it. Maybe the doorway suddenly opens up to a sunny beach. Or, maybe your dog is sitting at the kitchen table explaining tax law to you with suspicious confidence. Now, in an ordinary dream, you just accept all of this, right? Of course the kitchen opens onto the ocean, and of course the dog is a certified CPA. The dream just rolls on. You're experiencing a reality, sure, but you aren't questioning it. That is until this rare, bizarre thought hits you. Wait a minute, this isn't real. You look around, and the entire world changes without actually changing at all. The walls still feel solid, the floor supports your weight, but now you understand that absolutely none of it is entering through your eyes. You're asleep, and somehow, right inside the hallucination, you've woken up. To understand why this is such a big deal, we really have to look at one absolutely crucial concept: metacognition. Because what ordinary dreams lack isn't consciousness. I mean, you still see, feel, fear, and desire things in a regular dream. What they lack is insight. In a normal dream, your brain is essentially acting like this massive, multi-million-dollar special effects department that is being supervised by absolutely nobody. Contradictions just get absorbed into the storyline. Lucidity begins the exact moment that supervision returns. Metacognition is literally thinking about your own mental state. So instead of just seeing the kitchen, you realize that your mind is actively producing the kitchen. Your brain constructs a self, drops that self into a simulated world, and then somehow allows you to discover that the whole shebang is totally artificial. Section 1. Proving the dream state. Let's look at the experimental evidence. For years, a lot of scientists actually doubted this was real. The big problem was proving it. How do you prove someone is dreaming while they are asleep? Well, the solution came from the eyes. During REM sleep, your body undergoes REM atonia. This paralyzes your skeletal muscles, so you don't act out your dreams and accidentally jump out of bed. But crucially, your eye muscles are spared. Researchers figured out that trained lucid dreamers could agree on a signal while they were awake, usually looking left, right, left, right. Then, once they're inside the dream and become lucid, they deliberately move their dream gaze in that exact pattern. Because the physical eyes mimic that movement beneath closed eyelids, the lab equipment captures the signal, all while brain activity confirms the person is completely, undeniably asleep. They are literally sending a Morse code message from inside a hallucination. It's incredible. What's really fascinating here is how the sleeping brain enters this unique hybrid state. In an ordinary dream, your executive function is suppressed and self-reflection is basically zero. But the second you become lucid, boom. Regions in the prefrontal and parietal cortex, the areas that help monitor your thoughts and maintain a model of who you are, light back up. Now, the brain doesn't turn everything all the way back on, otherwise you just wake up. Instead, it restores just enough executive function to let you realize you're hallucinating. It's a true biological middle ground between dreaming and waking consciousness. Section 2. Lucidity versus control. Let's explore the mechanics of navigating this private universe. Think of a normal dream like a theater performing without a director. The sets change randomly, the actors make up their lines, scenes start halfway through. Lucidity isn't the theater shutting down. It's the director suddenly walking out onto the stage and realizing, oh wow, the audience, the actors, the building, it's all me. It's all part of the same mental production. It is just this staggering moment of pure insight. But, and this is a huge but, knowing you're dreaming doesn't automatically make you a superhero. Lucidity is just the insight that you are dreaming. Control? That is a completely separate and honestly a very unreliable skill. Your dream world is built on your expectations and your deepest unconscious habits. Your conscious intention has to fight all of that. If you really expect a locked door to stay locked, it might just stay locked, even though you know perfectly well there's no actual physical door. You could even be trapped in a nightmare, simply armed with the new terrifying information that your own brain is actively refusing to help you out. So why is the dream world so stubbornly realistic? Well, your waking brain is basically a giant prediction machine. Right now, it's building a model of the world and tweaking it constantly based on what you see and hear. In a dream, that external feedback gets completely cut off, so prediction becomes the entire world. That is why a dream brick feels perfectly solid even when it doesn't exist.
Your brain already knows what a brick should feel like, and it just renders the pressure and texture in real time. In fact, studies show that when a lucid dreamer follows a moving object in a dream, their physical eyes track it smoothly. People really struggle to do that while awake if they're just imagining an object. The brain isn't just dimly picturing a scene, it is actively rendering it as your current reality.
And because that rendering is so incredibly convincing, we run into this highly specific number, 3 seconds. That is exactly how long it takes an overexcited beginner to accidentally wake themselves up. When you first realize you're lucid, it is overwhelming. Suddenly, this dream feels like a private universe with no rules. Beginners get a massive rush of adrenaline, try to fly or do something dramatic, and instantly snap awake. They've essentially achieved the historic accomplishment of just noticing a wall and waking up. Arousal destabilizes sleep, so experienced dreamers actually have to train themselves to stay calm, often doing things like rubbing their dream hands together to anchor themselves in the simulation. Section 3. Live Experimental Space. Let's see how this fragile state becomes a two-way communication channel.
Because the dreamer is actually conscious, the dream turns into a live laboratory. Researchers have successfully talked back and forth with sleeping subjects in real time. They've used flashing lights, physical touch, and spoken words. In some of the wildest experiments, scientists asked sleeping participants simple math questions. The dreamers literally heard the question. Sometimes their brain incorporated it as a voice coming through a car radio in the dream. They did the math in their head and then singled the right answer back using those deliberate eye movements we talked about earlier. It's kind of like having a phone call while driving through a tunnel. The connection can be spotty, but it proves the dreaming mind is absolutely not sealed off from the outside world. This real-time communication also allowed scientists to finally bust one of the biggest pop culture myths out there. You know those movies that say you can live a whole, uninterrupted lifetime in a 20-minute nap? Yeah, the reality is a bit more grounded. When lucid dreamers performed timed actions, like counting to 10, it takes pretty much the exact same amount of time as it does when they're awake. Now, a dream can fake a long history, sure, just like a movie cuts to the next scene and implies months have passed. But the actual ticking clock inside this live experimental space behaves normally. Section 4. Glitches in the system. Because, let's be real, the brain simulation engine is definitely not flawless. One of the most infamous glitches is sleep paralysis. Remember that muscle inhibition, REM atonia, that keeps you from acting out your dreams? Sometimes your conscious awareness boots up before that paralysis turns off. So you wake up, realize you're in your real bed, but you literally cannot move a muscle. Because your brain is partially awake but your body is completely frozen, your threat detection system goes into overdrive trying to make sense of the panic. The result? Your brain might project nightmare imagery directly into your real bedroom. A shadow by the closet, footsteps, pressure on your chest. It feels terrifyingly real because your brain is still generating perception without enough external data to correct itself. Then there's the false awakening. This one is a real trip. This is when you wake up, get out of bed, check your phone, go brush your teeth, and then notice something physically impossible. And you suddenly realize, oh my God, I never actually woke up. A lucid dream can completely trick you by rendering a flawless, hyper-realistic copy of your morning routine. You might even experience 2 or 3 of these in a row, feeling like you're stuck in layers of dreams. It teaches us a deeply unsettling lesson. Certainty is just a feeling generated by your brain. During a false awakening, you feel absolutely 100% certain that you are awake, but that feeling is attached to a completely fictional bedroom. So how do people navigate this and intentionally trigger lucidity? They use reality tests. Things like trying to read a sentence, looking away, and reading it again, because text in a dream almost always scrambles or changes. Or trying to push a finger through your palm, checking a clock, or trying to breathe with a pinched nose. The exact test doesn't really matter as much as the habit does. By building a habit of critical reflection during the day, constantly asking yourself, am I dreaming right now? That habit eventually bleeds over into your sleep. You're basically training your sleeping brain to audit its own reality. Now, what can you actually do with this state once you're in it? People talk a lot about dream learning, but we have to be clear about the limits here. You can totally use a lucid dream to mentally rehearse physical movements you already know, like practicing a tennis serve or confronting a recurring nightmare. But you cannot learn a totally new physical technique or discover a fact that isn't already stored somewhere in your brain. Basically, if your waking self doesn't know how to rebuild a transmission, giving your dream self a wrench isn't going to teach you how to do it. The dream can't manifest facts it never had to begin with. Section 5. The limits of the mind. Let's see how all this builds to a profound realization about human consciousness.
Ultimately, lucid dreaming manages to separate two things that feel completely inseparable when we're awake: the act of experiencing reality and the knowledge of what kind of reality you're experiencing. In a lucid dream, you can stand on an impossible beach, feel the freezing water on your toes, and know with absolute certainty that the ocean is being generated entirely inside your sleeping brain. But it also highlights just how little the conscious self actually controls. You can know the world is imaginary and still totally fail to change it. You might decide to fly and just remain stuck to the ground by some authority that exists nowhere else but in your own unconscious mind. So if your conscious intention is just this one relatively weak influence inside a massive neural system while you sleep, well, it leaves us with one incredibly provocative question to think about. When you finally open your eyes and wake up tomorrow morning, how much is your conscious self truly in charge?